So, welcome to Wealth Revolution, the podcast where we break free from the old financial system and explore the new economy, conscious wealth, and personal freedom. I'm your host, Luke Halford, and we have a special guest today. Our guest today is Dr. Lee Howard, and Lee is a board certified surgeon turned health leader. He's dedicated to redefining aging and longevity. And he helps clients reduce reliance on medications and prevent chronic disease. He's the founder of Compass Human Performance based in Nashville, Tennessee. And you're probably asking, how is this relevant to financial wealth? I think for this episode, it really connects us around developing a wealth consciousness mindset. It's well known one of the greatest wealths is our health, both physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So I'm going to bring Lee in now, and we're going to dive straight into it. Hi Lee, how are you doing today? Thanks for coming on.
Good morning, glad to be here.
Great, thanks for taking the time out. So yeah, because it's early morning there, I think you're on you 9 o'clock or you're in Nashville?
Correct, yeah, just shortly after 9, that's right.
Great, so yeah, to get started, I'm going to run through the kind of same sort of structure as my workshops and the podcast structure, which is financial based, but we're going to relate it back to health. And yeah, the first slide for me is around the truth about the current system. And I feel the current financial system is really broken. And I think you can relate to this in the health system as well. We've built a model that focuses more on managing sickness than creating health. And I think we treat symptoms, not causes. I think we rely on medications to mask problems instead of addressing the root. I think also, like in the financial world, the current health model seems to serve a small group of people, the pharmaceutical giants, the insurance companies, and systems built on dependency. I think it's outdated. I think it's time for a new generation of leaders like yourself who believe in empowerment and prevention and proactive health and not fear and control. And I think, having said that, so some of the questions I'd like to ask is, what do you believe are the biggest flaws in the traditional healthcare system today?
Well, first, I would say that I agree with you. I think you're absolutely right that the system is flawed at multiple levels and is set up to only benefit certain benefactors, if you will. The saying the quiet part out loud is that it's not only how the healthcare system is set up, it's also how the food delivery system is set up. So if we look at how we feed, in the US, whatever, 375 million people, it's not that corn and wheat and soy are good for those 375 million people. It's that those products make cheap foods. And those cheap processed foods allow people of lower socioeconomic means to have some type of sustenance, some type of nutrition, if you want to call it that. And I think that this is an interlinking or a mirror of the of the brokenness, if you will, or the dysfunctionality of our financial system. They're one and the same. And I believe that it's probably the same puppeteer, kind of controlling some of the strings at the top. If I were to look at what is the biggest part or the biggest part of the system here in the US that's broken, I think you have to just differentiate between what is on the system or the government side and then what is on the consumer side. Because those two things both have their roadblocks, right? What has happened in the US on the consumer side is that there has been a conditioning over decades to get patients' attention and convince them that pharmaceuticals and relying on surgeries and interventions and all this kind of treating the symptoms, if you will, not really the root cause, is the best way. That's how you do it, and you do it through insurance, right? In other words, you do it as part of their system. So there's a large part of this that is for the system to turn, it has to be an awakening on the behalf of the consumer that those entities are not representative of the actual solution unless you're trying to make them rich, right? And then in which case
Yeah.
you're on the right path. But if you want to be healthy, that's not the right place to go. And
Yeah.
so has to be an awakening on the consumer side. And what that means is that the consumer has to be willing to invest their dollars, right, outside of their insurance to get the services that they want. It also means that there has to be um, a marketplace where doctors are offering wellness services at a price point and in a way that people can afford it. And I look at this kind of like, I don't know, whatever you call it, like housekeeping or whatever. There are people who will pay a small amount of money to have a basic level of service. And then there are people who want a higher level of interaction, a higher level of advice from their doctor, and they're willing to pay more for that relationship. So economically, there's a broad range of what's available to people, right? Everything from just sort of transactional analysis. But then on the institutional side, we got other stuff. We've got problems where insurance companies have entrenched laws that allow them to control certain things. We have a great representative here in the U.S. named Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's from Georgia. She is a big, what I would call libertarian, I guess. And recently she posted, I say recently, like a couple weeks ago, she posted on her Instagram page that she's tired of seeing the revolving door of world leaders coming to the U.S., kind of talking about economic policy and stuff around the world. And she'd rather see Donald Trump bring in insurance companies, pharmaceutical executives, and figure out how we're going to fix healthcare. And I believe that's absolutely the wrong thing to do, right? That we are in this position because Congress and our lawmakers have made laws so that the pharmaceutical companies and the insurance companies benefit. So I would have her consider that it's actually you and your constituents that are the problem. You've set up laws and have bowed to lobbying power that have allowed the insurance model to predominate. And instead of you guys incentivizing free market healthcare, and what I think that should look like is allowing insurance, or actually mandating in a way insurance, health insurance, to function much like your car insurance does. You, Luke, and I, Lee, should be responsible for some level of our basic health care.
Yeah.
And we should have skin in the game to know that if you get a stomach virus or the flu or something, those things, unless you end up in the hospital needing ICU care, overnight hospital stay, emergency, or even planned surgery, health insurance takes care of those things, but it doesn't take care of your basic stuff. And if
I
we
like that. Yeah.
incent
Yeah.
people economically, like, so we have a structure here, and I don't know if there's something similar in the UK called an HSA, right? HSA, FSA, that one stands for health savings account or a flexible spending account. It allows people, and unfortunately, this is tied to your employer. So what happens is that if your employer, or I guess more accurately, it's tied to your insurance plan. And usually what happens is that employee sponsored or employer sponsored insurance plans are the ones that have HSAs and FSAs with it. So if you're a single proprietor, a sole contractor, something like that, you may not have access to these plans. And so what happens is that these plans allow one to take tax or pre-tax dollars and put them into a tax deferred account that accrues over time so that they can pay for out of pocket health expenses. And that's what should be. We should allow people a bigger deduction to take their pre tax dollars, lower their pre tax income by moving some of this money an account that becomes a rollover account where basically even families can save money for healthcare expenses that go to your once a year checkup, the time that you need to go see your doctor, or if you're going to pay a concierge doctor like me, it pays for your monthly membership fees or some of the costs associated with it. It can pay for your vitamins. It can pay for you to go to a wellness retreat for a week to get some therapies there. And those dollars, that type of structure should be incentivized through legislation, and we should penalize the opposite of that. And that I think is probably the biggest change outside, and that's on the systemic side rather than the consumer mindset side.
Yeah, I love that. I think I can really relate to the car analogy you use as well here in the UK. I guess you'll have it. We have like an MOT, which means the car's got to be checked every year and to a certain standard so that you can't run it
Mm-hmm.
down. And you get, discounts for having a more economical car and things like that. And it's the same with the body, isn't it? If you're looking after the engine and the body, and you should get some kind of better insurance, I guess, or better benefits. People who run the car or the body into the ground are likely to get more, likely to need the healthcare. So I do like that idea. I think that's really makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would make people more conscious of their health. And we did, and I live here outside of Nashville, and our county, I guess it was maybe 2 years ago or last year, in the beginning, like January of 25, maybe, or January 24, got rid of all the requirements around emissions testing and all that stuff. So we did have a mandatory once a year inspection on our cars up until whatever, like I said, the last 1 or 2 years, and that process has been abandoned here, at
Awesome.
least
Yeah.
locally. Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice. But yeah, I do like that idea. Yeah, I think. Yeah, next question would be: so you went from being a surgeon to the health leader and running this business. What was the turning point that made you, rethink that?
It was my own health. I had graduated residency in 2010. You sort of expected, or at least everyone that I knew expected, to feel kind of tired and run down during residency. I mean, you're working, some pretty crazy hours and a lot of stress and stuff. And it's just one of those times where you're supposed to pay your dues. I had anticipated that once that time was over, I'd feel better. Took 3 months off between residency and starting my first job, and I slept a lot. Like I mean, I basically tried to recover there for whatever, 6 8 weeks, whatever it was, and I kind of started my first job, and I remember being both unhappy with my job and also looking around the hospital after gaining about 15 pounds or so. I was at the heaviest I'd ever been in my life, and I'm only 5'3", so I'm a small little guy. And so you put on 15 pounds on me, and it's a lot. And so I'm sitting around the doctor's lounge one day, and I'm looking down at my waist, and I'm thinking, okay, you're starting to look like that guy and that guy. And the common denominator is where you guys meet for lunch every day. And so, with that said, I started to really focus on changing my diet and making it. I knew how to approach nutrition if I had taken you to the operating room or you were in an ICU for a prolonged period of time. I understood that type of nutrition, but I didn't understand how do you take a 34, 35-year-old guy who's otherwise healthy and teach them how to eat right. Not this Southern way of eating where, it was a lot of carbs and stuff. And so I started to change that. That worked for me. And for a while, for about 3 years or so, I felt better. My energy came back, and I was kind of felt pretty good. And then about somewhere around 38, 39, things started to kind of go south again. I started to have erectile dysfunction. I had no libido. I had poor workout recovery where I had to basically stop working out, and poor sleep, all of the sort of hallmark signs of low testosterone. And so as I was going through this, I realized, like, okay, if you go back to your regular doctor, people that you've kind of, because I was living in my hometown where I grew up, said, if you're going to go back and talk to them, you know what they're going to tell you. They're going to tell you that you're possibly depressed, that you work too much, and here, take this pill. And I did not want that. And I was like, okay, if this is going to be, if you're like 38 and you've got this problem, then you know that there's a lot of other people out there that are struggling. So let's create a system that not only helps us transition through this perimenopause, andropause, right, when guys start to lose their hormones. Let's create a system that allows us to not only transition through that period, because the next part of that, the next chapter, if you will, after andropause, perimenopause, and menopause, is still another 30 years of life, or so. And you still have to be healthy for that. So the goal of Compass is to not only help people transition through this, say, 35, to 50-year-old period, but then it's also to provide a comprehensive longevity platform that will allow them to harness the best of the next whatever 30 or so years of their life after they go through this transition. And it started with me, and I realized that there were three factors that came up. Number one, there was a growing distrust in the U.S. medical system. People like me, I'm 49, had looked at our parents and said, they're getting sick, fat, old, and dead because they followed this advice. If I don't want to get sick, fat, old, and dead, I'm going to do the opposite. And so basically, anybody in the U.S. under the age of, say, 45 or so, 50 right now, is not wanting what their parents and grandparents had. Number two, there was a growing awareness that people needed to use their own discretionary money to seek for health care because, as we've already talked about, the current system is reactionary, not proactive. And therefore, using their dollars outside of that made the most sense. And the third thing is due to the internet and influencers, the popularity and realization that alternative therapies are not quackery, but do have a real life benefit started to become more accepted, right? So when influencers are talking about meditation and cold plunge, and they're touting the real world benefits, then it gets the awareness out there. And so now you've got these three factors where people say, I'm going to spend my money, I'm going to look at these people who are talking about this type of stuff. And I felt that those three factors were lining up so that Compass could fill that niche in the marketplace and continue to do so, in the future.
Yeah, yeah. I love all those sort of practices as well myself. Yeah, I think all those factors have a massive benefit on your physical health and mental health and emotional health and everything. And especially hormone replacement therapy. That's changed my life as I got older. And just these things, people need to open their minds up more to them. And regular sort of doctors and things in the UK won't prescribe these sort of things. And I guess around the world, like that as well. Unless it becomes a real problem and it's about prevention, I guess. But I think,
It's a problem because I think it affects men. Well, I mean, okay, let's just think about this for a second in terms of like what's going on in Europe when you look at how there have been essentially the masculine role in maintaining societal norms has been taken away. And so, or at least from what we would consider to be traditional masculine European norms, right? Like now there are a lot of that's been wiped off, and there's been evidence to show it's out there. You can go look this up. It was just published here, whatever, probably in the last 3 months, that they did a study where they took men and they gave some of them testosterone, some of them didn't get it, and they kind of gave them like a moral decision to make. And what they found out was is that men who are on testosterone will most of the time, and I'm not going to quote a percentage because I don't recall it, but those men who are on testosterone will almost always, or a high likelihood, will almost always do what's morally right, more so than the guys who are not on testosterone, right? And so there's a if we lower testosterone in a sense, we can, by proxy, that's destabilizing society because when you don't have a lot of strong masculine men running around to maintain order, to keep to foster and father families, you 1 or 2 generations, you're going to have a problem.
yeah, not thought of it in that way before. I didn't know that. Yeah, that's interesting.
But yeah, if we can keep men off testosterone, it's a good way to destabilize society because you're going to lead to a lot of impotent, incapable, fatherless, or incapable men or incompetent men that lead to fatherless homes. Essentially, dad may be there, but he's not really there. Because
Yeah,
he's
yeah,
not
it's
in
all
his
about
masculine.
leadership, I guess, isn't it?
That's right. It's
Leadership's
not in
what we
his
need. Yeah,
masculine role. That's right. Which is where we were designed to be.
yeah, yeah. Great answers. So yeah, I mean, shifting gears in the direction. Do you see parallels between how old institutions control health and how the old financial system controls wealth? Do you think there's a? I think you touched on this at the beginning anyway, but do you think there's?
Absolutely,
Yeah,
100%. I mean, we're here in Nashville. We've talked about that, and in Nashville, we have it's an interesting dynamic because there's two medical schools here in the city. So one is called Meharry, a predominantly black medical school that's essentially ran by Vanderbilt now. It was independent years ago, but it kind of had some struggles with funding and stuff, and so it's been sort of taken over, if you will, by Vandy. And then you've got Vanderbilt, and we've got several other schools in the state. We've got a couple, at least two other allopathic medical schools and a couple of DO schools. So here in Tennessee, you've got 6 medical schools, right? Either cranking out DOs or MDs. And within Nashville, like I'm not kidding, Luke. I could throw a rock from here, proverbially speaking. St. Thomas, Ascension St. Thomas, is less than a 400 yards or quarter of a mile from my office right now. That is the largest nonprofit healthcare center in the world, right? Then you have also anchored here in Nashville is HCA, which is the largest for-profit healthcare center in the world. And if you and we also have a large healthcare um, technology ecosystem that's been fostered by these big healthcare companies, right? Because if they can grow the next EMR system and they can invest in the next patient following technology or application that's coming out that they can utilize to save them money, then they're going to buy into that company. So it has been said that 85% of all healthcare decisions, healthcare policy decisions in the US start in Nashville. And it's because of these two companies that, with their reach, their combined reach, control so much of the healthcare marketplace. And I mean, if you looked at a strategic, like organizational map of HCA or their sort of whole, all the subsidiaries that they control everything from surgery centers, insurance companies, pharmacy benefit, man, you name it, man. Their reach is crazy big, right? And so when they speak, they shake a big stick, and people unfortunately have to kind of get in line. And it's the same way with big banks. It's the same way with people like BlackRock. I mean, we know that whatever 95% of the volume on any stock exchange on a given day is traded by like three people. So it says that 5%, even though we're the masses, right? Like we're talking about BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard make up 95% of the trades on any stock exchange in any given day in the U.S. Yeah, it's a one party system essentially.
I know they're in a lot of the pharmaceutical companies as well, don't they? They control them at least.
Of course, that, yeah, and the insurance
Yeah.
companies, the pharmaceutical companies, the equipment manufacturers, right? Everything from Stryker that makes joint replacement products or prosthetic heart valves, like they control all that stuff.
Yeah. So the priority is just money making, not not health, really, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, yeah, shifting again into a more, I guess, the solutions from this point, and my version of that with money. I'm going to pull another slide up. You'll see this when you see the recording because you don't see it when you've been interviewed. But the second part in wealth, we have the truth about the current system. I often cover, the financial system's broken. And I think there's a new economy evolving and there's a future of money evolving. And we can relate that the same way in health again. We could say, I'm going to switch the slide back. Right now, I believe we're going through like this revolution in finance, the way we exchange values evolving. The old system, the governments and the countries together with these world influencers and leaders are rewriting the rules around it. AI and crypto are playing a big part in this change. I think it's happening now. I think also right now we're living through a health revolution. I think technology and new data, like you said, the internet, AI, and longevity science are changing how we understand the human body. I think we're learning to navigate a world where health is no longer just about not being sick, it's about optimizing performance and extending life and feeling vibrant at every age. You've seen this with some people do it to the extreme. I think, I forget, is it Brian Johnson? This guy goes to
Yeah.
a super extreme, so kind of go backwards. And do you think people are ready for that, this proactive, personalised approach to longevity? And what's your view on that in general, I guess? And
Well, I
what
think
would you
it's one
say?
of those scenarios where people say they want it, but I don't know that they're willing to go through what it takes to get it.
Yeah.
Um, and so I did a video about this recently where I was talking about how people abdicate their health for convenience, right? I live in a neighborhood where there are a lot of people who have done well financially. They have a lot of financial means, and there's no shortage of DoorDash or Uber Eats coming to this neighborhood, right? And
Yeah.
it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me to have the level of wealth and financial prosperity that these people have, and yet relying on Starbucks to feed them breakfast 4 out of 7 days a week. So, in that video, I go on to say that if you really want to know, or so most people are looking for like this one thing, I mean, I want to know what's making me sick. Well, I got news for you. It ain't one thing. Okay.
Oh,
It's multiple things. And if you think you're going to solve a difficult clinical problem like obesity or heart disease, um, or osteoporosis with a single intervention or a single interaction, you are going to be disappointed. The likelihood is that you're going to require four or more interventions kind of collectively to achieve the desired outcome. The and so the and one of the major pieces of that, which is the part that people just really don't want to hear, is that we eat too damn much food. And if you really want to be healthy, you need to consider how, and I don't mean that fasting like 24 hours every day is the right answer, but strategically limiting and really being intentional about the food that you eat, how much of it you eat, and when you eat. That it will go, and just moving. Those two things alone will probably knock off 60 to 80% of the badness that can happen to you. But what that requires of someone is to cook most of their meals at home, abstain almost totally from alcohol. It requires them to make social concessions, because now going out to eat is not really that much of an option. Like, I don't like to go out to eat. It's a pain in my butt. I don't know what I'm getting. I oftentimes am disappointed by the quality of the food because I've cooked now for so long for my family, with being able to just provide good food. It's not necessarily that expensive. You know what I mean? Like, I can make hamburger meat and it can be good, and not expensive, but yet very healthy. And so I think that people just aren't really willing to recognize that they have a major role in this, and food is a big, big part of it. And I talk to people about the 5 areas that we kind of go through with our clients. So stress, hormones, exercise, diet, and sleep are the 5 areas that I want to focus on. And if we can start to optimize behaviors in each of those 5 core areas, then we'll win the game.
Yeah, yeah. That kind of leads on to the next question. What are some of the key habits or daily practices you believe will help people thrive? And I think you've kind of covered that in a way. So it's interesting. I'll just evolve
Yeah,
into the
stress mitigation, right?
yeah,
So mitigate
yeah,
stress. That's different for everybody, because if you got a young family, versus somebody who's an older person with kids that are grown up, versus a business owner and a non-business owner. But you got to manage stress, because stress ain't going away. We've all got adrenal fatigue. Stop crying about your adrenal fatigue. All of us do. If you've got a bank account and a cell phone in 2025, you got adrenal fatigue. I don't care what the stupid tests tell you. Humans were not meant to live in this cycle. It's fatiguing for our body. And test normal or test abnormal, I don't care. You got adrenal fatigue. And if you want to deal with it, stop thinking that pregnenolone and DHEA or ashwagandha is going to be the answer, and start looking to how you're controlling your emotions. How are you responding to the external world? And are you allowing that to control your dialogue? Hormones, you already said it. I mean, for men specifically, testosterone's a big deal. I start seeing hormone abnormalities in men and women somewhere between 35 to 40. So I think that hormones need to be in there. Exercise. This is not complicated. It actually gets easier as you get older. I've got late teenage boys, and I'm like, you need to be in the freaking weight room. You need to be doing XYZ. They need to be pushing their bodies hard at 49, 50 years of age. I shift exercise patterns to more of a movement based plan that minimizes injury, lowers volume, maximizes time under tension, and leads to more, not necessarily anabolic muscle growth, but maintenance of the muscle mass that we have. Diet, I'm a big fan of paleo. I know a lot of people would kick back on that, but I use paleo as sort of the starting point, and then we sort of customize the paleo features from there. A way that I
Is
do
that
that is,
is that the one they
go ahead.
call is that the caveman diet? It was known as. Is that
Kind
that
of
one? If I
caveman. Yeah,
remember,
yeah,
yeah,
that's right. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. It's
yeah,
basically like, get rid of modern grains and stuff. And so some of the things that would normally be excluded on paleo would be things like rice and dairy, right? And I
yeah.
believe that for a lot of men, and my clients in general, but I know for men specifically, eating white rice is a good carb. They tolerate it well. It's a good way for them to fuel their body. And so white rice, even though it's excluded on paleo, I kind of tell them to use a little bit of it. Right? We don't want to go overboard and just eat huge quantities of rice every day. But the other one is dairy. Right? The big problem with dairy is that people use it as a food group. Well, it's not a food group, it's a condiment. And if you treat it like a condiment, if you have a little bit of cream in your coffee, right? That's kind of what I had here. If you have a little bit of cream in your coffee, or you use a little high quality grass-fed cheese, on top of your sweet potato or something. You know what I mean? Like use it in a way that makes it to add taste and flavor to food, not to rely on as a major source of nutrients. But paleo is kind of my dietary preference. I'm not a big fan of saying like I got to follow exactly the blood type diet, although blood type can definitely give you an insight into what types of foods are likely to or not to work well with your body. So I happen to be an O positive blood type, which means I have the original hunter gatherer DNA. And I can tell you my body follows that to the letter. I do not eat grains. If I do, I pay for it. I have a severe intolerance to gluten. I can tolerate a little corn. I do fine with white rice. I will do well with huge quantities. I eat an obscene amount of red meat. I do well with red meat. I don't ever have any problem with that. And I don't need a lot of vegetables. I eat mainly sweet potatoes. I eat fruit, mainly berries, apples. I don't eat like bananas and pineapples and stuff. I eat like pears, plums, blackberries, raspberries, blueberries. And that's what my DNA, along with that paleo experiment, has done for me. I think that most people will get the biggest benefits on the protein side from red meat, whether that's lamb, bison, venison in the US, deer and stuff like that, are work really well for most people. And then the last area is sleep, and just so many of us don't prioritize sleep. And the reason is that it's not convenient. It's not convenient for you to go around your house and tell everybody it's 8:30, turn off the damn lights, shut your mouth, and go to bed. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it's
With all
time
the
to wind down.
distractions of phones and things like that, the
Yeah, like
screens and
we need, we need to we need to go back to the old incandescent bulbs, not these stupid LED things, or get you like a little. Here in the U.S., we have one that's a Philips light. Like all of my kids have this in their room. It's a little desktop lamp that sits there, and it's got different wavelengths or spectrums of light, and it's geared towards at night. Instead of them using like their overhead lights or an LED light, they turn this little lamp on and it mimics like the moon or the regular light spectrum, so it won't offset your melatonin levels and all that kind of stuff. So trying to get in bed early, give yourself an hour before you want to go to sleep where you sit down, you journal, maybe you take a walk, you do some stretching, pray, whatever, meditate, whatever it needs to come to you for you to prepare your body for rest. And that's just not a convenient proposition for so many people. That's just how it is, but it's true. But that's what
yeah.
we need to do. I mean, think about it. Humans 40,000 years ago, Luke, when the sun went down, they were going in the cave. You know what I mean? Because that's where it was safe, and everybody was kind of laying around there and hanging out, and relaxing. And people slept in shifts. This whole concept of like having to go to bed and sleep for a full 8 hours straight for a lot of men, dude, that's not going to work. That's not how our bodies are wired. And I can tell you, if you ask the women, if sleeping was an Olympic sport, most of our wives would get a gold medal every night. Women sleep like men never can imagine. Okay, some of that can be overcome by men who will substitute with progesterone. So progesterone can be a tremendous sleep aid for most men, traditionally thought of as a female hormone, but it has a big role in sleep. So experimenting with that can be good. But just thinking about it, like men are the protectors of the herd. And if you look at the patterns in men, and I see thousands of men and women every year, the patterns are very clear. Most men are going to wake up somewhere between like 12 and 2 in the morning. They will be awake for various amount of time. Sometimes it's a couple of hours, sometimes it's only 15 to 30 minutes. But most men are going to wake up, and there are things called chronotypes which determine kind of what your body clock is when it comes to your circadian rhythm, like when you're supposed to sleep best and when you rest better and so forth. So it's been proven that there's just different chronotypes. Like people don't always sleep 8 hours at night from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. There is a pattern where people need to take a nap at like 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon for an hour or whatever because they're only going to sleep for 6 hours at night. That's not
Yeah.
convenient for society. Tell your employer, hey man, I'm a guy that needs to take like a nap from 12 to 1. I'll be back at 1 o'clock. That's not going to work. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, in some places in Europe, like Spain and that, they have this siesta and they do have naps in the day. But it's
They live
interesting, yeah,
longer
because
there too, don't they?
yeah, they do. Yeah, and I think what I'm hearing in a lot of areas is just a lot of it's just common sense, basic things, isn't it? Yeah, really, it's just finding your way of doing it. Stress and relaxation and food and exercise. They're all, yeah. It's not rocket science in a way, but it's just
It's
getting
very
people
bad.
to
I
actually
tell
do
people,
it.
this is so simple.
Yeah,
It's going to be disappointing. It's going to be
yeah,
so
yeah,
simple, it's boring. But the problem is that it's so simple, so basic that most people discount it, and they will not approach it with any level of consistency. And
yeah, yeah,
if you can divorce yourself from those two problems, you will be successful. And now let's take this as an interesting thing, right? Because we talked. This is all about economics too. If we do go the way that some people have speculated that the world could go, which means that with AI, crypto, bartering or changing goods, and even the cost of goods can become so simple and so inexpensive that one may not necessarily have to work, and we may
yeah.
redefine what that looks like, right? I mean, what our
Yeah, this
relationship with
is
work is.
common sort of what people are saying is going to happen. Yeah, yeah.
That's right. You
Basic
sort of build your own
income.
economy, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So would that not be then, in a way, taking our society back 400 or so years, where there were no major factories where we employed 20,000 people or whatever, but everybody was sort of responsible for their own local economy, right? We may see economies shift back to a more local production for most things. Food, right, would be easily sourced locally. You would probably get things like even clothing that could be sourced locally, because now manufacturing the same pair of jeans that you would normally have to go to an expensive retailer to get can be done locally on from a small, manufacturer. And so because now getting these machines to cut and sew fabric are easy, right? I don't think this is going to happen in the next 2 years, but I think it's more of a continual kind of revolution that'll happen around it. But if we
yeah.
look
That's
forward,
interesting.
I mean,
Yeah,
it may be that we go back into a time where goods and services are sourced more locally, which would allow us then to return to a pattern of a kind of a daily life, right? That was more accustomed to where we were, because people are going to erase the commute, right? Like,
yeah,
what if I,
yeah.
as
That's
a doctor,
interesting.
set up my own practice on my own farm? So now I've got some substance that I can have on my own place. I can raise a basic amount of food there, but I can also see patients and drive revenue from a business perspective on my own property. And I can conduct that business because it's easy, because of the internet, and we can exchange money through crypto or whatever sort of other measures we have, or even if it's bartering. But now, me making a deal with the local butcher, right, becomes easier to get what I
Yeah,
want. And so I think that we could be in for a major economic shift, but there may be a bright side to that from the health aspect, where people's daily lives will be simplified, and rest, recovery, family, community, coming back to some of those things that I've never been to Europe, Luke. I haven't had the opportunity to go there, but from my understanding, there's a lot of things, especially in some of the smaller villages in Europe, where it's still a very close knit family life, and there is time taken out for meals, and it's still a very communal type atmosphere. And I think that's what we need. That at least in America, right? We've become so isolated, so individualized. It's not really that good anymore.
yeah, yeah. It makes a lot of sense, don't it? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's see what other questions we've got. I'm just letting this run naturally, but let's have a look what we've got. Yeah, I mean, I think I'll go on to the next section, which is, for me, I normally call this wealth consciousness. So to me, wealth consciousness means, like in health terms, you could call it health consciousness, but it's about realizing that your thoughts, your emotions, and your habits are all kind of energy, and they directly affect the body. And so many people chase the next supplement, like you've said already, the diet or hack. But true wellness state starts in the mind and the emotional state, I think. So I guess beyond nutrition and exercise, what do you believe drives true health and health span? I think you've covered a lot of that already, but
It's an awareness.
yeah, yeah,
Most people will sit there and tell you, I don't think they understand how their body truly works, and so they make a decision. They make like a maybe an intervention, and then they have good intentions. Their thought process is not necessarily flawed, but it's the way that they conduct the experiment that gets them confused. And so, yesterday I saw a guy who had to have surgery for pancreatitis. He lost what looks like most of the endocrine function of his pancreas, and so he's having trouble with diabetes. And so they had tried some medications, but they only tried them for 2 months. They didn't track labs. They didn't really have any objective measures to see if they were improving it. And so they came in and told me that this medication had failed. And I told them, like, no, I don't think you can say that. I think you did an inadequate experiment. You didn't titrate the dose. You didn't get follow-up markers. You didn't give it a long enough time. And that's an experience that I have from being the doctor and seeing this, hundreds and hundreds of times a year, and being able to say, like, no, you can't really rule that out right now. So I think that there is a misconception on a lot of people's part that they understand their body. And if you want to know if gluten really is bad for you, you need to get off of it for at least 3 months. And I can honestly say, though, that my clients who travel to Europe will definitely tell you that gluten in the US and gluten in the Europe are two different animals. Eating bread or bread products and gluten products here in the US will make so many people have non celiac gluten intolerance. At some level, they are getting inflamed. And in my opinion, gluten is the biggest contributor to autoimmune disease and sort of total body dysfunction, especially gluten here in the US. But if you go to places in Europe where Roundup and other pesticides and moldicides, fungicides are not used, the grains are not as processed. They're more of an ancient strain of a grain like an einkorn wheat or something else. And I don't know if this is true, but my understanding is that across most of Europe, beer only lasts about 2 weeks. Like after 2 weeks, they pour it out and they're brewing a whole new batch because there's not as much preservatives and junk in it. Well, in the US, that doesn't happen, right? So most people here drink beer, they feel sick. You go to Europe, people can enjoy a pint, not feel bad. So some of this is not necessarily the individual human. It's more of the food processing that goes ahead of it. But by and large, people don't want to hear the things that we already talked about. You got to sleep more, manage stress, get your diet right. It's hard for them to hear that and adjust to it. And that's the
Yeah, I think
key.
yeah, I think many people just treat health like it's a reaction thing, and they only act
It
when
is.
something
Yep.
goes wrong.
Only going to go
It's
when I feel bad.
it's like almost like we need to rewire the mindset in the
Yep.
prevention more into the prevention direction. It's just yeah, you don't see it till. And I really like what you say about like giving up gluten. I've experienced that in loads of foods. Like you don't really see what the problems are causing until you give them up. You need to give them up for like 30. Even fasting's a good example. People don't try fasting, but once you try it, you realise the benefits. It's a
Oh,
practice that
absolutely.
is so beneficial, isn't it? Even if it's a long or short fasting, that it helps you so much.
Hmm. I agree.
Yeah, yeah. Let's keep moving because I think we're coming up to the hour. But let me have a quick look at. Oh, bear with me a sec. The next one topic. I mean, for me, in my workshops and part of this world revolution is some kind of formula or format in the way I help people. So for me, this would be I call it the financial freedom formula, and it's all about sort of helping people with the most simple stuff. Sometimes just spending less than they earn, from that to investing correctly for the crypto. But how would what's the formula that you use to, I guess, help people around that area? What's your sort of health formula, or you could basically, I guess, give some listeners a start where to get started. I guess like what are some of the things you suggest?
Yeah. So I think there are um, there's a few basic things that everybody needs to do continuously. And we kind of touched on that sheds, stress hormone, exercise, diet, and sleep. And so we're going to touch on that again in a second. But from a supplementation standpoint, I think this becomes really basic. I'm a big fan of vitamin D. There's an overwhelming amount of evidence for the tremendous power of having a vitamin D level. And I traditionally push vitamin D levels up over 100. And I like to keep them there. That's where my clients see the best results. The second one would be a methylation formula, something to help with methylation, whether that's a methylfolate, methyl B12, because most of us have some type of MTHFR enzymatic defect, which can compromise our detox capacity or some other processes around detox within our body. So taking a methylated supplement or a methylation supplement would be a good thing. And I think those two are sort of the set it and forget it, the things that you can take from now till the day you die. um, the rest of it really boils down to stress hormones, exercise, diet, and sleep. I mean, and it changes a little bit over time, right? Because your exercise goals at 60 are not the same as they are at 45. And so, there's nuances around that. But as a general rule, I just tell people like, look, if you catch yourself doing something, sitting at a restaurant, just ask yourself, where in those 5 areas is this helping me move the needle in a positive direction? And if you can identify that this is either in some way positively impacting your stress management, your hormone balance, your exercise, your diet, or your sleep, then you need to question whether or not this behavior is a positive behavior for you. And this is as simple as putting your phone down at 8 o'clock and just recognize, like, now I'm going to go journal or walk or read the Bible or pray or meditate or whatever it is you like to do at that time. Talk to your spouse, spend time with your kids, learn a language. I don't care, but you got to do something. And so I think, yeah, that becomes a really good, it's just kind of doing a continual inventory. And that's no different, dude, than if you're at your job. If you're at your job, you're asking yourself most of the time, like, what's my next task? What's my next task? What's my next task? And kind of moving the ball forward, right? It's no different than you doing that in your health. It's just most people don't have that mentality of being proactive. It's rather reactive, like you said before.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, yeah. I think you're absolutely right on that. Yeah, it's more about being consciously aware and just catching yourself. And sometimes the emotions play a big part. I think that like if you have
Oh,
any time I
absolutely.
overeat is when I emotionally, like I'm stressed, and it's being recognised and noticed. That's just emotional eating. Nutrition. I need to eat
Boredom.
nutrition for
Boredom is
energy. Yeah,
huge.
boredom. Yeah,
Oh
yeah,
my gosh, boredom kills so many people, dude, at night. So, and I realize that. So now I go in the sauna later. Like, you and I have been
yeah.
talking for quite a few years now, and I used to go in the sauna around like, 6 or so. Now I push that over to like 7:30 or so because what I've done is I've shifted my eating window so that I'm trying to finish eating before 5:30 every day, which is, here in the US in another month or so that it'll be totally dark, pitch black dark at
Yeah.
5 p.m. And so I'm trying to eat, earlier in the day and then pushing my sauna window out a little bit, which basically gives me like from 5:30 to 6:30 or so to kind of let my food digest. And I take a walk about, 6:45 or so for about 45 minutes. 7:30, I'm in the sauna, and and now, you go into the sauna, you sweat your butt off, right? You drink all this water and you're kind of like, oh, dehydrated. You're not going to want to eat anything. You know what I mean? You're not going to eat anything in the hour after you get out of the sauna. So you're gonna go to bed, and that's what's kept me from kind of like succumbing to that boredom eating at night. Is just finding something to do.
Yeah, it's just replacing it with different practices, isn't it? From whether it's whether it's sauna, and I like to do even a bit of
Yeah,
stretching or yoga can wind me down, or
that's
like
right.
you say,
Journal,
meditation, reading.
meditate,
Yeah,
learn a language,
yeah,
practice an instrument, talk to your kids. Study something that AI, that you want to just kind of read about. And I say that I don't mean go get your iPad out. Right, what I mean is print the
yeah,
stupid articles out on paper, people, and read the paper. Don't use your phone or your tablet. And another thing, you talk about how sinister this can be. In the U.S., we have I don't know what's the same in the UK, but there's at a gas station most of the time there's a bunch of food in there, right, and drinks. It's pretty
yeah,
much all it
yeah.
is. So it's like candy,
Same here.
chips,
Yeah, yeah.
sweets,
All the
processed
rubbish.
crap.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah, it's
Seven
all
Eleven
garbage,
over there. You go in there and it's just full of every bit of crap you can
full of
see.
crap. Yeah. So
Yeah,
I tell people, I'm like, why are you going in the stupid convenience store? Like the thing you went there for was gas, right? Not food. If you're going to the convenience store for food, then we got to address that first because that's your first problem is that you're going to the wrong place to seek out the thing that you need, right? And so I tell them, like, there's no reason at all ever for you to ever go inside a convenience store. Zero. Like, don't ever go inside the convenience store because the only thing that's going to come out of there is something bad.
yeah, yeah. Makes sense. Right, we'll finish off on the last section because we've got 5 minutes, but let's finish this strong. So we got, for me, I always bring it back to the same model, but for me, after I've done the financial freedom, people have got financial freedom, it's what's beyond that. So really the next topic will be, I guess it's the same thing, but beyond health. So if we think I see you can sometimes meet people that can be chasing health and fitness and they can be really fit, but they can be burned out and still anxious. So just like people chase money and never get rich, they're chasing the wrong thing. So to me, longevity is not just about adding years to your life, but it can also be about adding life to your years. So I think true longevity must go beyond just the physical body. It must include meaning, connection, and purpose, I guess. So I guess when someone achieves physical health, what comes next? Yeah, how important is purpose around the longevity and things like that? What's your view on that? I guess.
I think there's three phases that most people go through. The first time that they start doing this, there's usually some kind of alarm bell going off. So they need to get
Yeah,
back to feeling good, right? Get back to a baseline. And then after a period of time to get that accomplished, we focus on helping them look good, which sounds kind of almost like a vanity proposition. It's not meant to be that way. It's more about how are we setting you up for that next part of your aging game? And what that means from the look good standpoint is optimizing your body composition. How do we optimize your muscle mass, help you lose excess body fat or visceral fat, which really sets you up for longevity, right? If you can't be healthy and you can't live a long, healthy life if you're carrying around lots of visceral fat, or if you don't have muscle mass that allows you to get up and down in your chair, or to go up and down steps. You will become socially isolated. You will die an early death. And so once we kind of have that first two phases accomplished, we focus on that third phase, which is helping you live longer. And you're right. I mean, it's here at Compass, we call it TML, or targeted maximal longevity, which is the functional lifespan. We want to extend functional lifespan. How can you be as active, cognitively aware, outgoing, making memories with your family, doing the things that bring you fulfillment at that phase of your life for as long as you can. And I agree with you, right? One of the benefits of maybe even considering how that economy could shift back to more of a primitive type atmosphere. Think about having grandparents at home, having a multi-generational home again, where people rely on each other. There's constant guidance from the older generation. I think we've kind of dismissed the knowledge and skills that they have, and we're not going to capture those. Once those people are dead, they're gone. It's gone forever. Um, and I think that there could be a lot of better. We could move society in a positive way, both mental health wise and just from society overall, right? Like better morals, have a more cohesive definition of what we want society to be like, so that it's protecting everyone, allowing for our kids to play outside, recognizing that there's evil in the world and that evil must be dealt with. And I believe that we're going to have a sort of revolution of sorts where the good and righteous people of the world um, are going to stand up against the evil sort of dominating forces that have kind of controlled or influenced certain parts of our lives over the years. And people of good moral character have kind of had enough of that crap.
yeah, yeah. I love it. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think we've nailed it. I think we just bang on time, which is the hour, which is great. So I think, yeah, some great insights. Thanks for this. And where can people find you? You online, or I'll probably put some link. I'll put your links into the video when it
Yeah,
goes
yeah.
live.
Please do
Yeah,
that. Go to so our website is Compass HP, compasshumanperformance.com. I'm on Instagram at Dr. Lee Howard, and I think it's just at Lee Howard on Facebook. Yeah, follow us on those platforms. Go there, and I put out content, research papers, and general topics that I see, interesting things that I see in the office on our socials. Yeah, and we're in the process of launching some new initiatives. So for those people who are not in the U.S. but want to kind of maybe have involvement with a health coach, just stay tuned. Go to our website and drop us a line, and we'll keep you informed on some of the changes that are coming up.
amazing. Thanks for coming on today. And yeah, we'll see you soon. Yeah, I'll put your links in the social. And yeah, thanks again. Appreciate it.
Great. Good luck to all your listeners. I hope that they're prepared for both the health and the wealth revolution that's to come.